Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Cham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Gavaran Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Gangamayi Ki Jagannayi Ki Bhakti Devi Tulsadevi Ki Shri Guru Parampara Ki Samavekta Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the Supreme devotees, all glories to the Supreme devotees, all glories to the Supreme devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru Devananda, all glories to Shiva Bhagavan. Maganati Niranya Syaka Nandana Salakaya Chakshudam Jinitam Jena Tasmai Shri Deva Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Shtapitam Jaina Putale Swami Rupagra Madhyam Darati Swavarantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Prabhupada Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Trigashitam Sahagrada Gurutanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaduttam Parijna Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Vishcha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Kinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauruvani Pacharani Nirvishesha Srinivadi Vashachari Satarani Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Kinamani Shri Vashamana Videvi Dayataya Kripabdaya Krishna Samvada Vigena Dayane Prabhave Namaha Guru Jvala Prema Darshan Guru Bhakti Darshan Guru Guru Shakti Vigahani Mostute Namaste Guruvani Shri Murtai Vinutadine Rupanu Virudha Prasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Guru Kishoraya Shakshat Vairagi Murtai Viklamar Sambore Parambo Jayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitananda Namani Guru Shakti Swarupaya Ruparupa Varayate Guru Vibhava Bhumeshvam Nirdeshta Sajnana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathayate Namaha Panchakalpataru Vishakripi Sindhu Bhyavacha Patitanam Bhavneku Vaishnavedu Namo Namaha Namo Mahavarnaya Krishna Prema Parayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gauri Vishnu Namaha Panchatatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Surupakam Bhakti-avatara Bhakti-kyam Namami Bhakti-shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhuri Namanu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantarara Kantaramostite Jaitam Suratur Pangur Mama Mandir Matirugati Matsavasha Paramboja Shri Varamanana Mohana Tibet Bindaranya Kalpadruma Dashima Nagar Singhashana Shri Shivara Shiva Govindeva Prishtaladi Sedu Manusmarami Shri Mandra Sarasarambi Vang Shiva Tatta Tasta Takasham Venus Vanaya Gopi Gopinatha Shri Etuna Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivasi Yoga Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Jastejase Aviravirbhava Vajranaka Vajralamsta Karmasayan Randaya Tamo Grasa Om Svaha Abhayam Atmani Bhuvishtom Kshaum Narayan Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. So this morning we're reading from the 4th canto, 10th chapter, which is called Dhruva Maharaj's Fight with the Yakshas, text 13. Please repeat. Autanapati Satada
Autanapati Satada
Shastravarshena Purina
Shastravarshena Purina
No Eva Drishyatachana
Na Eva Drishyatachana
Asarena Yatagiri
Asarena Yatagiri.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Dhruva Maharaj was completely covered by an incessant shower of weapons, just as a mountain is covered by incessant rainfall. Report. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out in this connection that although Dhruva Maharaj was covered by the incessant arrows of the enemy, this does not mean that he succumbed in the battle. The example of a mountain peaks being covered by incessant rain is just suitable, for when a mountain is covered by incessant rain, all dirty things are washed from the body of the mountain. Similarly, the incessant shower of arrows from the enemy gave Dhruva Maharaj new vigor to defeat them. In other words, whatever incompetency he might have had was washed away. Autanapadi sattada shasta varshena burina na eva drishyatat shana asarena yatagiri. Dhruva Maharaj was completely covered by an incessant shower of weapons, just as a mountain is covered by incessant rainfall. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam nanayate grim yakripa tadaham bande Sri Gurun Dinatarinam. So in the Vedic civilization, the two truths or two natures of our human existence is harmonized. So what are these two truths or two natures? These are of course material truth or reality or nature and the spiritual reality. So the material reality refers to our quality under the three modes of material nature and refers to the activities of this body: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, and the emotions and the mental state and the intellect that are associated with these activities. All of this is our material reality, the so-called identity in the material sense. Now, coming to an honest awareness, a frank acceptance of that identity, that is also a big step, because even in material society, although we can say everybody's an illusion already because they don't know that they're spirit, soul, they think they're the body, but then even in that bodily conception, the illusion is compounded, because thinking they are the body, but they don't even know what are the true qualities of this body they have. Because they've actually divorced themselves, they've detached themselves from the actual true point of reference or point of authority, which is Krishna. Now Krishna declares in Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvarna maya shristam gunakama vibhagasaha. From me have come guna and karma for everyone, and this has all been arranged in a very nice system, my own varnashram dharma system. So Krishna is the ultimate standard of reference for everyone in all spheres. We haven't even started talking about spiritual life yet. We're still on the subject of material life, but even in this realm, Krishna is the standard of reference. You want to know what are your abilities in the material sense, then we have to look at Krishna's system of varnashram and find this out. So, yes, then of course the spiritual side of life, this means devotional service to Krishna. This is the function of the spiritual identity, to serve Krishna, to surrender to Krishna. So these two things, material nature, spiritual nature, they constitute our identity here in this material world. Now, in the varnashram system, a king, he has to channel his activities and emotions according to dharma, which is prescribed for him in the scriptures. So Dhruva Maharaj is king, and we see he is here exercising his anger, exercising his propensity to violence, his skill in fighting. He's attacking these yakshas, and they're fighting back, but he's very determined, he's not giving up. He's very fierce in his opposition to the enemy. Now these qualities, to be angry, to be violent, to be very determined, a very determined opponent to an enemy, Now what is this? This all arises from the propensity of defense, which is a material propensity, so to speak, an animal propensity. The animals are fighting, the barbarians are fighting, and they may exhibit great determination and bravery. So what is it about a king's anger and violence that makes it harmonious with spiritual life? And that is that it is done according to the principles given by Krishna. The king is not simply becoming angry at anything and becoming violent under any circumstance. Of course, there are stories in history of some very degraded kinds of kings who would whimsically have people's heads chopped off for anything. But that is not proper behavior. The whole science of Varnashram is that the emotions have to become focused in certain activities as prescribed by the scriptures and not otherwise. In other words, you cannot just let the emotions just run free as you like. One has to live under scriptural direction. So a king, then he has his prescribed time and place for exercising this anger and violence. And a king also, he has to be at the same time simultaneously cultivating his spiritual life. Now this is true for all sections of Varnashram. Because the spiritual life, which begins with hearing and chanting about Krishna, this purifies the emotional life. This transfers our emotional attachment to Krishna step by step. Connects our consciousness with Krishna. Now when this is done, then something wonderful happens. When the consciousness becomes connected with Krishna, then the human being who is fulfilling his duty under Varnashram restriction, his activities actually become glorious. They become extraordinary. Just like Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj is no ordinary king. And we shall, this is revealed in this chapter, how his defeating of the yakshas is actually so wonderful, so glorious. He was completely fearless. And he actually, Swayambhuva Manu, you see towards the end of this chapter, Swayambhuva Manu personally comes and requests him, please, Dhruva Maharaj, you must cease and desist from attacking these yakshas, because if you continue, you'll destroy them all. This species will cease to exist in this world. Now, this is because the yakshas, they have a certain nature. Dhruva Maharaj is angry at them because they killed his, how do you say, his brother and his other mother, not his real mother. So he was angry because family members had been killed by these yakshas. So he attacked them. And they would not surrender. Now this is the point. You see, a king, when he uses violence, he will grind the enemy to dust so long as they don't surrender. But when they surrender, even if it is someone like the personality of Kali, if he surrendered to Maharaj Parikshit, then immediately Maharaj Parikshit gave him shelter. So a king is always ready to forgive and protect someone who surrenders to him. This is the rule for king. He cannot simply, burn with anger and smash, 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 and they're going, no, please, stop, smash, like a madman. When the opponent surrenders, then he must immediately change his whole emotional state. All right, now time for anger is over. Now forgiveness. Now give them shelter, give them engagement, give them a place to live. But these yakshas, they have their special yaksha nature. They're not like human beings. This is actually why there are so many different species of life are there, because there are so many different kinds of nature of the living entities under the three modes. So there are some kinds of living entities who are just sworn to making trouble. That is their nature. They must make trouble. So maybe they start this business in the human form of life, but that's not really what human form of life is meant for. So when they leave human form of life, they're placed in a more appropriate species. Something like yakshas or rakshashas or ghosts. These kinds of entities, they're very fond of making trouble, spreading confusion and illusion and delusion. This is their pleasure in life. And we should know this. I recently had a funny experience when I went to Copenhagen some weeks ago. So the devotees, they wanted me to get my opinion on the statements of one person. He's not a devotee, but he goes by the name Ananda. I don't know where he got this name from. But he's a person who claims to have made contact with the UFOs. And so some of the devotees in Copenhagen became very interested in what he had to say, and they even put him on the radio Krishna program. And he was talking for 2 hours about the different entities from outer space and what they're doing. So many devotees were trying to understand this, and some were thinking, yes, this is Krishna consciousness. It was a big discussion. So then when I came, they were asking me what I thought of it. So I was explaining that these UFOs, they are also in that category of some subtle or ghostly or demoniac entity like yakshas, rakshashas. Because all they do is create disturbance. Some people are thinking that they're some higher entities, from some vastly superior planet, and they come to Earth to establish a new phase of human consciousness and civilization, and to bring peace and new age and blah blah. But actually, when one sees practically the effect, they simply are zooming overhead and creating disturbance. Sometimes they come down in different forms of entities, come out of these UFOs, and then they sometimes kidnap people and take them for a ride in the UFO and let them go again. But it all adds up to just some disturbance. There's nothing more than disturbance has come out of all of this in all these years. And it's funny to note that so-called primitive people, because the people in the West think they're so advanced. So so-called primitive people, like the people in African jungles and so-called other primitive people in other places, they have always seen such sights, balls of light flying through the air, coming down in the jungle, floating above water, zooming away. And you ask them, what are these? And they will say, oh yeah, these are the demons. We know. But in the West, they become very fascinated and they speculate, what can this mean? So these are just some type of entity meant for making trouble. And they assume a technological guise, you see, some vastly superior technological guise, like a spaceship, and they come down. And maybe they tell people that they're from planet X or planet Ypsilon. But it doesn't matter what they say. It's just for creating confusion. So anyway, this is a type of mentality which is awarded with a particular type of body. So yakshas are such example. So yakshas it is their nature to make trouble. They can't help it. So therefore they would not surrender to Dhruva Maharaj. In fact, you see, they don't know how to do anything else except make trouble. So Dhruva Maharaj is attacking them, and they just make trouble. They make more and more and more trouble. They don't know how to stop. So Dhruva Maharaj, then he is just following his dharma, and he keeps killing them and killing them and killing them. Finally, Swayambhuva Madhu said, well, Dhruva Maharaj, this is why the yakshas are ordered to live in the Himalayas, where it is very cold, lonely place, far away from the human beings, so that they won't give trouble to human beings. Let them live peacefully in their mountain kingdom. If you keep fighting, these yakshas will cease to exist, and this won't be good for the total arrangement of the universe, because there has to be some place for people or for entities of this kind of mentality to exist. So anyway, human beings, proper human life means, as I said, a balance between material nature and spiritual nature. So, and material nature, proper material nature means according to Varna and Ashram, and proper spiritual nature means devotional service to Krishna. Any other definition of these two things, if we define our material nature according to some other reference invented by ourselves, then that will be Maya. That will be an illusion. And similarly, if we define our spiritual nature in any other way except service to Krishna, that will also be simply Maya. Therefore, we call these persons who try to attain some spiritual state, but without surrender and service to Krishna, we call them Mayavadis, because they're actually an illusion. So, everything has to be judged according to this. For instance, independence. Now Srila Prabhupada, because everybody is looking for independence, this is a universal urge. We see this everywhere. Everybody's trying to become independent, declare themselves independent. So Srila Prabhupada explained, yes, independence is a very exalted state. This is a state in which the Brahmanas live, and the renunciates, sannyasis, yogis, saintly persons like this. They are independent. But what does independence really mean? So we analyze it from the spiritual point of view and also the material point of view. From the spiritual point of view, independence actually means dependence upon Krishna. Someone who's fully dependent on Krishna can become independent of material existence. And then on the material side, we see they're aloof. They are sense-controlled. And Srila Prabhupada said, ultimately, it means to become free of these propensities: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Srila Prabhupada was once explaining that if someone actually becomes completely detached from these urgings, the urge to have to eat or sleep or mate, defend, one who's actually free or independent of that, he's completely fearless. He has no need to depend on anyone for anything or fear anything. So this is actually the Varnashram system, or we should say the total Vedic culture, the combination of Varnashram Dharma and spiritual culture, Krishna consciousness, is meant to bring one up to this point of complete independence from material existence. This is explained by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that a self-realized person, he has no need to perform his duty. He's not dependent on that. Because he knows fully well, I'm not the body. So he can live with or without the duty of maintaining the body. But yet again, he does perform his duty to set example to others. And his example is wonderful. Because, as explained, being Krishna conscious, and Krishna, because there is connection, his consciousness is invested in Krishna only. So therefore Krishna works through him. So such personalities, they're like Dhruva Maharaj. They're manifesting actually they're part of Krishna's own entourage. Krishna performs wonderful activities with his devotees. And when his devotees appear in this world, they display wonderful activities, attract the human beings to follow that wonderful example. It is all attractive. That is the nature of Krishna's activities. So, yes, independence. It depends on, or independence is seen in those who are fully dependent upon Krishna and fully sense-controlled. Now, if somebody tries to become independent in some other way, in other words, they're not dependent on Krishna, nor are they sense-controlled, then this is simply illusory independence. This is Maya. This is actually the root of the whole material existence. This false sense of independence. Yeah? So this modern society, it is really Maya Sukhaya. It is really a society of total illusion, because we see everyone is trying to be independent. Everyone is declaring independence. All different categories, different sections of human beings. They're all proudly waving some flag. I am independent. Waving their false identity around. When Srila Prabhupada was touring in the United States, he created a great stir, because he would point out the foolishness, for instance, of the woman class who were considering themselves independent, his so-called woman's liberation. So he created a big stir by giving press conferences and just pointing out that this is all simply illusion. They declare themselves independent, and yet at the same time, because from their independence there is pregnancy, unwanted children are coming, then they have to beg from the state. They're actually dependent, completely dependent. And actually all this type of modern nonsense we see, different groups, different sections of people asserting themselves in some independent, so-called independent way. This is all a result of the excess of modern civilization. Modern civilization has created a fool's paradise by saying that the whole purpose of life is simply sense gratification. And the more sense gratification you get, the more so-called successful you are. So there's a big arrangement. Everyone, enjoy your senses. Here, take facility for sense gratification. So people become intoxicated by this. And they're exploiting. And falsely, and yet at the same time, falsely declaring themselves, I'm independent, I'm supreme, I'm this, I'm that. Yet actually they're all dependent upon this demoniac arrangement of modern civilization. And if it would crash down, which it could at any moment, then you see all this false independence just evaporate suddenly. All this walking around proudly with the head in the air, advertising one's designation. I am a whatever it may be. They're always inventing newer and newer designations, you see. And it seems like the more perverted they are, then this is the trend in modern time. If you're a homosexual, or if you're a psychopath, or if you like to eat stool, or then you form a liberation front, Stool Eaters Liberation Front. We are the independent stool eaters. We want our rights to eat stool. So this is bizarre. But this is the modern world. And all of this is coming out. It's like it's a big lump of stool and so many maggots are inside, squirming and eating and enjoying. So modern civilization has become like that. A big lump of stool, and all kinds of nasty living entities are thriving. But when the stool is gone, the living entities are gone too. They can no longer live there. So this is all very artificial, unreal. Sometimes people make, we see that, and these people, they try to always transfer the responsibility, the bad reaction of their own foolish activities upon others, blaming others. We are in this unfortunate condition because of somebody else's fault. They point the finger. It's not our fault. It's not our fault that we suffer. It's because they oppress us. Sometimes this argument is taken so far. We hear people who eat meat, they try to defend themselves by giving some philosophy. Sometimes this question comes up, that anyway, these animals, it is their karma. They are meant to be killed by someone. Otherwise they wouldn't be killed. So therefore, we kill them and we eat them. But it's because of their karma. It's their responsibility. In this way they try to defend their own activities. This is like some man tried to make a court case. He was driving down the wrong side of the road, and he smashed head on into another car, and he killed the two occupants of the car. So then he made a court case that he wanted to collect damages from the property of those people who had died, because since the accident he had such trauma, couldn't sleep at night, and also it must be their fault because he was on the wrong side of the road and they didn't swerve out of the way, you see. So he was driving on the wrong side of the road, but they should have moved out of the way. Because they didn't, it was their fault. So this way he was making the argument to the judge. Of course the judge did not accept it. But this is the same kind of thing. In other words, a complete rascal. Complete rascal. So people use such ridiculous arguments, and this way they try to defend their illicit activities. And the bad result, they try to blame on others. No, it's not our fault. We're innocent. We're all right. So, but the Vedic culture, there are 4 legs of Dharma, and one of them is truth. So this truth, as I was explaining in the beginning of the talk, there is a material truth, the true material nature, which is determined by varnashram. And then there is the spiritual truth. So one has to live according to both principles of truth. And in this way, one becomes powerful, empowered by Krishna. And one becomes free, just like these expressions are there. In truth, there is power, or the truth shall make you free. These are well-known expressions, and it's true. There is unlimited power because Krishna becomes inclined to those who are established in truth. Just like again the Brahmana class. They are empowered. They're speaking. Whatever they speak, there is great power. If a Brahmana speaks something, for instance, if he speaks a mantra, then there is a powerful effect. If you ask a Brahmana a question and he gives an answer, there will be great power in that answer. And the Vedic culture actually depended completely upon the speaking power of the Brahmanas. So why were the Brahmanas powerful in their speech? Because they're always situated in truth. They're always situated in full dependence upon Krishna. And they're always situated in their own duty as Brahmanas, never deviating an inch from it. So in this way, so nicely, they become empowered to do Krishna's mission in this world. So in this Krishna consciousness movement, we are expected to preach this mission, this Sankirtan mission. So this is requiring us also to become empowered. And this is accomplished in the same way, by being situated in truth. Both definitions. To become situated properly in our, according to our material nature, and also, of course, to become servants of Krishna, spiritual. There should be no contradiction between the two. So, otherwise, if there is an internal contradiction, if one is speaking, trying to preach, and at the same time one's own personal life is conflict between the message he's speaking and his own personal life, then this will result in something very unfortunate. One can go on in this way for some time, but this inner contradiction grows and grows, and then finally it manifests in a very unfortunate way. There was recently a little strange story, but on the television there's one program, I think you have it in Germany too, Sesame Street is for children. And they have these persons on the Sesame Street, they're speaking very nicely. You see, they they also seem to be very sense-controlled, very ideal characters, speaking very sweetly for the children to give them a good education, so on. So, but of course, they're not ideal characters. So recently there was a news story of one of these actors from the Sesame Street who had become very well known on television as being a very great friend to children. But then he went mad. And so it was reported that he appeared in some neighborhood and he was running naked down the street, and there were some children waiting for the bus, and he was running up and beating them and taking their lunches away. And then he was doing other crazy things, smashing windows in houses and attacking people with sticks, beating them. And finally the police were called, and he was taken away in the ambulance. He was shouting and screaming. So it was a big shock for the people. Oh, we thought he was so nice. We saw him on television. Why is he acting like this? So obviously some internal contradiction resulted in some psychological explosion. So that pertains to a materialistic person, but in Krishna consciousness, we also have to harmonize our material nature with the spiritual nature, so that there's no contradiction. Whatever that material nature may be, there is a way to bring it in harmony with Krishna consciousness. But that requires some honesty, some straightforwardness. For instance, one should not declare oneself independent. In other words, take a position which is reserved for topmost Brahmana, when one does not have the ability to control one's senses. Srila Prabhupada told a story to illustrate what real independence means. The story of one Brahmana who lived about 150 years ago in Bengal, during the time of a great king, Maharaj Krishna Chandra. So this Brahmana, he had a gurukul, and he was known all over the kingdom for his profound learning and his expert teaching. But he was living very, very simply. So the king wanted to honor this Brahmana because he was considered a jewel in the kingdom. So the king came to the Brahmana's home and he offered him, you please take my help. You can come and live with me in my palace, become my minister, or I can build you a palace here, or I can give you so much facility. And the Brahmana refused. No, I don't want anything from you. I don't want to become dependent on you. And then the Brahmana explained, I have everything I need. My students come to me every day. They have baked a little rice. So my wife takes this rice and she prepares it, and also she adds some leaves from one tree that grows in the courtyard. And this is my sabji. And this is how I'm living. I'm very satisfied. I don't need any help from you. So Srila Prabhupada told this story to illustrate what is genuine independence. It means that one is depending on Krishna completely, and one's senses are under control so that he cannot become tempted by by anything material. So if we're not on that platform, then it's not that, then you have no position, no possibility to execute spiritual life. But then we have to honestly assume a more natural position. So anyway, that is the whole science of Varnashram Dharma. When one finds one's natural position under Varnashram Dharma and is nicely situated in it, then from that position he can begin to cultivate Krishna consciousness, and he can also preach. This is the glory of Lord Chaitanya's movement. Everyone should preach. It doesn't matter. Grihe taki bani tako, sada hari anam boli tako. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, it doesn't matter. One may be grihastha, or one may be grihe taki bani. Bani refers to one who lives in the forest, one who is actually completely independent from material society. It doesn't matter, one or the other. As long as we are properly situated in our dharma, then we can preach. But if there's contradiction, then there will be some breakdown. So one has to become situated in truthfulness. And this will give the potency for being successful in preaching the Krishna consciousness movement. Almost 6 o'clock. Are there any questions? Yes.
Prabhupada said that to get a real to acting, that we first should become pure devotees, and then we can purely act in our varna. But then we are already free from all these bodily connections.
Yes, well, acting purely means to act only for Krishna. This Varnashram Dharma system is ultimately meant for Krishna's satisfaction only. Ultimately, Varnashram Dharma means devotion service. But it is a very nice system because it begins as a means by which we can engage our material, or shall we say selfish nature. In the beginning, we're not very devoted to Krishna. That requires selflessness. So we're more selfish. We're worried for our own maintenance, our own sense gratification. So Varnashram gives facility for that. So, but when one becomes situated properly in Varnashram and starts to perform one's duty, then gradually one is giving up this selfishness. And he finds that there is much more bliss in selflessly serving Krishna. And when he derives all of his happiness simply from serving Krishna, at that point he's a pure devotee. And at that point his activity in Varnashram Dharma becomes most wonderful. Because all of his inspiration is coming only from remembrance of Krishna. So this, you see, that's why the Varnashram Dharma culture has to go together with the spiritual culture of Krishna consciousness. Hearing and chanting. When one becomes attached more and more to hearing and chanting, then the whole purpose of his activities. They are becoming more and more dedicated to Krishna. Yes?
Alright, please, in connection to it is stated that the devotee of the Lord is peaceful, and even if one offensive tries to preach the person and to make him calm on the part of spiritual consciousness. But to Dhruva Maharaj, although he was a pure devotee of the Lord, and he was offended by the yakshas of their killing his brother and mother, but why didn't he forgive them? But he became envious and he was over...
No, but I explained why he didn't forgive them was because they did not surrender. See, a king, he's not acting whimsically. At least a king who's following Varnashram Dharma principles properly. He's not just acting whimsically. The Yakshas, they deserved punishment. So, this is what the king does. So he began to punish them. And they did not surrender. So then it grew into a real fight, a fight to total extinction. But as I explained, it's not the Yaksha's nature to surrender, it's their nature just to always make trouble. So therefore Swayambhu Manu had to come and say, okay, Dhruva Maharaj, you better stop me. Not because Dhruva Maharaj was doing something wrong, but just that these Yakshas, they don't live under Varnashram Dharma. This is not the type of living entity that can be controlled by such system. Therefore they have their own place to live. This is the way the Vedic civilization worked. You have the Varnashram civilization. If you can fit in it, fine. Then you live as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra and make spiritual advancement. But if one has one's own idea of the purpose of life, some false, illusory idea, then one has to live somewhere else. You can live in the jungle, live in the mountains. So then the kings generally were not concerned with those fellows living outside. But in this case there was, because the Yakshas killed his brother and the mother of his brother because they had been walking through the forest or something like that, some lonely place where the Yakshas are visiting. So therefore Dhruva Maharaj took it upon himself to punish these Yakshas, but again they don't surrender. So it wasn't that he was envious of them or anything like that.
He spoke about harmonizing spiritual and material nature. So it seems to be a little bit difficult to harmonize that the Kshatriyas are allowed to eat meat. Isn't it difficult to practice spiritual life at the same time?
No, because the Kshatriyas are extraordinary personalities. Their meat eating is, they may do, it's not that they always do. Some Kshatriyas are not taking flesh. But they may do, because they have to hunt. This is the way in which they keep themselves sharp in their military arts. They go to the forest, and when they're in the forest, this is a very austere situation. They're depending upon the nature around them. And so they practice their hunting, and then they kill some animals, and these animals they can eat, because their hunting expeditions would go for days and weeks. So this is how they would live. And this is not sin for them. Similarly, it's not sin if during a king's travels, if he's approached by a woman who wants to have a child by him, it's not sin. Because a Kshatriya is an extraordinary personality. Such child will also be very extraordinary. This is improving the population of his kingdom. When before this age, Kali Yuga, in previous ages, actually this among the higher classes, the sex was done not for sense gratification, not out of lust, but it was done for producing nice children. You read in Srimad Bhagavatam, you read the talks between, for instance, Diti and Kasyapa. So Diti wanted to have sex with her husband at the wrong time. But why was it? Was it just because she was lusty, wanted sense gratification? No. She was eager to have children. So this was a very different mentality than we see today. Dr. Guru, you have a question?
It was his Dhruva Maharaj's father attached to his wife.
Yes.
He was attached to her illicit sex. Just lectures.
Well, in these affairs, you see, between husband and wife, there is always attachment. We're talking about the motivation for sex. That's what we were just discussing. And in previous ages, it was for having children. But of course, the relationship between man and woman in marriage, there's attachment. There must be. They like each other. So Dhruva Maharaj's father, King Uttanapad, he simply more favored one wife than the other. He liked her better. For whatever reason. Maybe she made a better sabji, I don't know.
Ram Sharana, he lectured about this, if you are very attached to sense gratification, especially related to sex, then you are completely an instrument. You start to do some nasty things. I don't know what you...
Yeah, well, okay. So there's the demoniac culture and there's the civilized or Vedic culture. So the demoniac culture, then it's a culture of illicit sex. And so they become attached, yes, but they become attached to activities in the mode of ignorance. Very sinful, very degraded. Now in the Varnashram civilization, well, there's also attachment because they get married. But the thing is, their standard of life is not sinful. They don't engage in illicit sex. So that attachment is of a less harmful kind. Because it's not sinful. It doesn't create havoc in society. But it's still attachment. So because of that attachment.